The lunch rush at Romano's family restaurant was in full swing when Wellington stepped through the glass doors, his $1,000 Italian shoes clicking against the worn linoleum floor. The contrast couldn't have been more striking. Here was a man whose net worth exceeded the annual GDP of small nations, standing in a modest diner where the most expensive item on the menu cost $12. Had built his empire from nothing, starting with a small tech company in his garage 23 years ago. Now at 47, he controlled a portfolio of businesses spanning technology, real estate, and renewable energy. His face graced the covers of business magazines monthly, and his investment decisions could shift entire markets. Yet today, he found himself in this unassuming restaurant for reasons he couldn't quite explain to himself. The hostess, a young woman with tired eyes and a forced smile, looked up from her podium. "Table for one, sir?" she asked, though her expression suggested she was already calculating whether this well-dressed stranger would tip appropriately or complain about the simple fare. "Actually, I'll take a booth in the back if you have one available," replied, his voice carrying the confident tone of someone accustomed to having requests fulfilled without question. As he was led to a corner booth, noticed the restaurant's authentic character. The walls displayed faded photographs of the original owner's family, and the aroma of homemade pasta sauce filled the air. This wasn't the type of establishment where he typically conducted business. Those meetings happened in private clubs or expensive hotels downtown. But something about this place felt different, honest in a way that his usual haunts never did. Sliding into the red vinyl booth, pulled out his phone and began scrolling through emails. 3 merger proposals, 2 acquisition opportunities, and a request to speak at business school. His assistant had already declined the speaking engagement. His schedule was booked solid for the next 8 months. Success, he had learned, came with its own prison of obligations and expectations. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Looked up to find a woman standing beside his table, notepad in hand. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with dark skin that seemed to glow despite the fluorescent lighting, and eyes that held an intelligence that immediately caught his attention. Her name tag read, and unlike the hostess, her smile seemed genuine. "Just coffee, please, black." "Coming right up," replied, already turning toward the coffee station before pausing. "You know, you look familiar. Are you from around here?" Hesitated. Recognition usually meant interruptions, requests for selfies, or awkward conversations about money. "I travel a lot for business. Maybe we've crossed paths somewhere." Studied his face for a moment, then shrugged. "Maybe. I'll get that coffee for you." As she walked away, found himself watching her movements. There was efficiency in every step, a purposefulness that reminded him of his early days when every action had to count, when wasted motion meant wasted money. She handled 3 tables simultaneously, never missing an order or forgetting a refill, all while maintaining genuine conversations with each customer. When she returned with his coffee, had made a decision. "Actually, could I ask you something?" "Sure, what's on your mind?" "What would you do if you had $1 million?" His eyebrows rose slightly, and she glanced around to see if this was some kind of joke. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. Pretend someone just handed you a check for $1 million. What would you do with it?" Setting down the coffee pot, leaned against the booth's edge, considering the question. "Well, first thing, I'd pay off my student loans. That's about $43,000 right there. Then I'd help my mom with her house. She's been struggling with the mortgage since my dad passed." Nodded, intrigued by her immediate focus on obligations rather than desires. "What then?" "Then I'd probably do something crazy and invest in real estate. Not fancy stuff, just regular houses in decent neighborhoods. Fix them up and rent them out. Build something that keeps making money even when I'm sleeping." "Why real estate?" "Because people always need somewhere to live, and if you treat them fairly, they'll treat your investment fairly. Plus, I've been reading about it online during my breaks. Seems like the kind of thing where you can start small and grow over time." Felt a familiar excitement building, the same feeling he got when he recognized exceptional business instincts in others. "Have you ever thought about starting your own business?" Laughed, but not unkindly. "Mister, I work double shifts 6 days a week and take night classes at the community college. When exactly would I have time to start a business?" "What are you studying?" "Business administration. I know it sounds basic, but I figure I need to understand the fundamentals before I can do anything bigger." "That's not basic at all. Most people skip the fundamentals and wonder why they fail. A customer at another table raised his hand and glanced over. "I should probably take care of him. Did you want to order some food?" Found himself wanting to continue the conversation, but he could see she was working. "Just the coffee for now. Take your time with the other customers." As moved away to attend to the other table, reflected on their brief exchange. In his world, conversations about money usually involved complex financial instruments, market analyses, and risk assessments presented by teams of MBAs. Yet this waitress had given him one of the most practical and sensible investment strategies he'd heard in months. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. The quarterly board meeting had been moved up 2 hours. He should leave now to prepare, review the presentation slides one more time, practice the answers to likely questions from the board members. This was the kind of meeting that could affect stock prices and determine the future of thousands of employees. But found himself in no hurry to leave. He watched work, noting how she remembered details about regular customers, how she, without being pushy, how she diffused a complaint from an elderly man with grace and humor. These were skills that couldn't be taught in business school. They came from experience and natural emotional intelligence. When she returned to refill his coffee, had another question ready. "What's the hardest part about this job?" Paused, coffee pot in hand. "Honestly, it's not the long hours or the difficult customers. It's knowing that no matter how hard I work, no matter how good I get at this, it's still just a job that pays the bills. There's no equity, no ownership, no building towards something bigger." Have you ever thought about changing that? Every day. But thinking about it and having the opportunity to do something about it are two very different things. Pulled out his business card, then hesitated. In his experience, revealing his identity too early in a conversation changed everything. People became nervous, started saying what they thought he wanted to hear instead of what they actually believed. But something about's directness made him want to take the risk. "I'd like to continue this conversation sometime if you're interested. Maybe over coffee somewhere we could talk without interruptions." Looked at the business card, her eyes widening as she read it. "Wellington, you're that Wellington, the tech guy." "Guilty as charged." "Why are you here? I mean really here in a place like this?" Considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. He'd been driving back from a meeting with his financial advisors, men who had known him for years but treated him like a walking bank account. They'd presented him with investment opportunities that would make him richer, but none that would make him happier or more fulfilled. He'd driven past Romano's on impulse, remembering a time when business was simpler, when he actually enjoyed the challenge rather than just enduring the responsibility. "Sometimes you need to remember where real value comes from," he said finally, "and it's not always in the places you'd expect." Slipped the business card into her apron pocket. "I get off work at 9 tonight. There's a coffee shop down the street that stays open late." "I'll be there." As stood to leave, he placed a $20 bill on the table for a $4 cup of coffee. But as he walked toward the door, he realized the tip wasn't about the money. It was about respect for someone who had given him something more valuable than he'd expected to find. The afternoon sun hit his face as he stepped outside and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Not for another deal or acquisition, but for a conversation with someone who saw opportunity where others saw obstacles, who understood value in ways that couldn't be on a balance sheet. His phone was ringing, probably his assistant wondering where he was for the board meeting preparation. But for the first time in months, let it go to voicemail. Some opportunities, he was beginning to remember, were more important than obligations. The drive back to his office took him through neighborhoods he rarely visited, areas where people lived and worked and dreamed of something better. As he stopped at a red light, found himself thinking about her investment strategy. Real estate. Simple, practical, scalable. It was the kind of thinking that had made him successful in the first place, before he'd gotten caught up in complex financial instruments and sophisticated investment vehicles. By the time he reached his building, had made another decision. The board meeting could wait. There were some calls he needed to make, some research he needed to do. Because sometimes the best investment advice didn't come from Wall Street analysts or business school professors. Sometimes it came from a waitress who understood the difference between getting rich and building wealth, between having money and creating value. And Wellington, despite all his success and sophistication, The coffee shop where waited was a stark contrast to the high-end establishments he usually frequented. Students hunched over laptops occupied most tables, the air thick with the aroma of espresso and the quiet hum of conversation. He'd arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table where they could talk without being overheard. When walked through the door at 9:15, she had changed from her work uniform into jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look younger. She scanned the room until she spotted him, then approached with the same confident stride he'd noticed at the restaurant. "Sorry I'm late. Had to finish closing duties and change clothes." "No problem at all. Can I get you something to drink?" "Just a coffee. I'm trying to cut back on caffeine, but it's been a long day." As went to the counter, he found himself watching in the reflection of the glass pastry case. She sat with perfect posture, her hands folded on the table, observing the other customers with the same attention to detail he'd witnessed at Romano's. This wasn't someone who missed much. "So," said when he returned with 2 cups, "I have to admit, I looked you up after you left. Forbes estimates your net worth at around $800 million. Smiled, "Forbes is conservative. Which makes me wonder why you're asking a waitress for investment advice. You've obviously figured out the money thing pretty well on your own." "Have I? Let me ask you something. What do you think I do with my days?" "Considered this. Board meetings, I'd guess, reviewing investment proposals, making decisions that affect thousands of people, flying to different cities for deals." "You're absolutely right. And do you know what I realized today, sitting in your restaurant?" "What's that?" "I haven't made a single investment decision in the last 3 years that excited me. Every choice I make is calculated by teams of analysts. Every risk is hedged by committees. Every opportunity is evaluated by people who never built anything themselves." Took a sip of her coffee, studying his face. "So you're bored." "I'm disconnected. When I started my first company, every decision mattered. Every dollar invested was a dollar I couldn't afford to lose. Now I write checks for amounts that would have seemed impossible back then, but none of it feels real anymore." "That sounds like a good problem to have." Laughed. "You'd think so. But success without satisfaction is just another kind of poverty." "Okay, so what does this have to do with me?" "When you talked about real estate investment today, you weren't reciting something you learned in a textbook. You were describing a strategy based on understanding real people's real needs. That's the kind of thinking that actually creates value." Leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Wellington, with all due respect, you don't know anything about me. For all you know, I could be completely wrong about real estate. Maybe I'm just good at making things sound reasonable." "Maybe, but I don't think so. Tell me about these night classes you're taking." "Business administration at the community college. I started 3 years ago, taking 1 or 2 classes per semester while working. I'll have my associate degree next spring." "What made you choose business?" "Honestly, I got tired of making other people rich. I've worked in restaurants since I was 16, and I've watched owners build successful businesses while their employees stay exactly where they started. I decided I wanted to understand how the other side works." Found her honesty refreshing. In his world, people's motivations were often hidden behind layers of professional courtesy and strategic positioning. "What's your long-term plan?" "Get my degree, save as much money as possible, then find a way to start something of my own. Maybe buy a small property and fix it up, rent it out, then use that income to buy another one. Build slowly and avoid debt as much as possible." That's actually a very sophisticated approach. Most people want to get rich quickly. I've seen what happens to people who try to get rich quickly. They usually end up poor quickly too. Pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. "This is the first building I ever owned, a rundown office space that I bought for $30,000 when I was 26. Examine the photo. It looks terrible." It was terrible. Leaking roof, broken windows, heating system that hadn't worked in years. But it was in a decent location, and I knew I could fix it up for less than it would cost to buy something nicer. "How much did the renovation cost?" "About $15,000 in materials. I did most of the work myself, nights and weekends for 8 months. Then I rented out office space to small businesses for twice what my mortgage payment was." That's exactly what I want to do, just with residential properties instead of commercial. Why residential? Because I understand residential. I know what makes a place feel like home, what repairs matter to tenants, what neighborhoods are worth investing in. Commercial real estate seems more complicated. Nodded approvingly. Most successful investors stick to what they understand. Too many people chase opportunities in areas where they have no expertise. So why are you telling me this? What do you want from me? The directness of the question caught off guard. In his business dealings, people rarely asked such pointed questions. They danced around motivations, implied rather than stated, negotiated without ever saying what they actually wanted. I want to learn from you, he said finally. Learn what? How to see opportunity the way you do. You look at real estate investment as a way to create something sustainable, not just profitable. You think about treating tenants fairly because you understand that's good business, not just good ethics. You plan to grow slowly because you know that's more likely to last. Those aren't revolutionary concepts, Mr. Wellington. They are in my world. Most of my peers think about real estate as numbers on a spreadsheet. Cap rates and IRR calculations and exit strategies. They optimize for short-term returns and maximum leverage. And that's bad. It's not bad, but it's not everything. What you described today, building something that keeps making money while you sleep, creating value for tenants while generating income for yourself. That's what business used to be about before it became all about quarterly earnings and shareholder returns. Was quiet for a moment, processing what he'd said. Okay, so assuming you're serious about this, what exactly are you proposing? I want to make you an offer. I'll provide the capital for your first real estate investment. You find the property, manage the renovation, handle the rental process. We split the profits 50-50. What's the catch? No catch. Well, one condition. I want to be involved in the process, not as the boss, but as a partner. I want to remember what it feels like to build something from the ground up again. Stared at him for a long moment. You're serious? Completely serious. How much capital are we talking about? Whatever it takes for the right property. 50,000, 100,000 more if necessary. And you'd trust me to handle that kind of money? I'd trust you to handle it better than most of the people I currently invest with. Stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the street. Waited, recognizing the signs of someone processing a life-changing decision. He'd made enough of them himself to understand the mixture of excitement and terror that came with opportunity. When she returned to the table, her expression had changed. The polite professionalism was gone, replaced by something harder to define. Determination, maybe, or hunger. If we're going to do this, we do it my way. I find the properties, I manage the renovations, I screen the tenants. You provide the money and advice when I ask for it, but you don't override my decisions unless I'm about to make a serious mistake. Agreed. And if this works, if we make money on the first property, I want the option to buy out your share over time. This isn't charity, Mr. Wellington. I want to own something, not just manage it for someone else. Felt a familiar thrill, the same rush he'd experienced during his first successful business negotiations. What would you consider a fair buyout structure? I pay you back your initial investment plus 50% of the profits we've made, then I own the property outright. After that, we can decide whether to do another deal together or go our separate ways. That's more than fair, it's generous. No, it's smart. You get your money back with a good return and I get to build something that belongs to me. Everyone wins. Extended his hand across the table. Partners. Shook it firmly. Partners, but I have two conditions. Name them. First, I keep my job at Romano's until this property is generating enough income to replace my wages. I'm not betting everything on a deal with someone I just met, no matter how rich you are. Smart, what's the second condition? You have to promise me something. When this works out, and I'm confident it will work out, you don't forget what you learned from doing business this way. You don't go back to your boardrooms and committees and forget what it feels like to build something real. Considered this. It was an unusual condition, more philosophical than practical. But as he looked at serious expression, he realized she was asking for more than a business promise. She was asking him to remember who he used to be, before success had insulated him from the excitement of genuine entrepreneurship. I promise, he said. Good, now when do we start looking for properties? How about this weekend? I can pick you up Saturday morning and we can drive around different neighborhoods, get a feel for the market. Actually, I have a better idea. There are 3 properties I've already been watching online, 2 single-family homes and a duplex. All of them have been on the market for at least 60 days, which usually means the sellers are motivated. Pulled out a notebook. Tell me about them. The first one is a 3-bedroom house about 15 minutes from downtown. Listed at $75,000, but it needs new flooring and kitchen appliances. The second is a smaller house in a better neighborhood, listed at $85,000. Needs paint and minor repairs, but it's move-in ready. The duplex is more expensive, $110,000, but if we can get both units rented, the income would be significantly higher. Which one interests you most? The duplex. Higher initial investment, but better long-term potential. Plus, if we have trouble renting one unit, we still have income from the other. Found himself impressed once again. You've really thought this through. I've been thinking about it for 3 years. The only thing missing was the capital to actually do something about it. Well, now you have the capital. When can we look at these properties? I'll call the listing agents tomorrow and set up appointments for Saturday morning. As they prepared to leave, realized something had shifted in their dynamic. The conversation had evolved from him offering charity to a waitress into a genuine business partnership between equals. Wasn't asking for a handout or an opportunity to manage his money. She was offering him a chance to remember what real business felt like. Walking to their cars, felt energized in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Tomorrow he would attend his regularly scheduled meetings, review quarterly reports, and make decisions that moved millions of dollars around various investment vehicles. But Saturday, he would look at houses with someone who understood that real wealth wasn't about having money. It was about creating value that lasted. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Wellington was genuinely excited about Monday morning. Because Monday would be the day he started building something again, one Saturday morning arrived with an unseasonably warm breeze and clear skies. Found himself awake at 5:30, earlier than usual for a weekend, his mind already focused on the day ahead. He'd spent Friday evening researching property values in the neighborhoods had mentioned, cross-referencing rental rates with local economic indicators. The numbers looked promising. When he pulled up to his apartment complex at 8 o'clock, she was already waiting outside, a leather portfolio under her arm and a thermos of coffee in her hand. She dressed practically, jeans, comfortable shoes, and a jacket that could handle dust and debris. "Morning," she said as she climbed into his car. "I brought the listing information and some additional research I did last night." Noticed she'd printed everything out instead of relying on her phone. Old school approach. "I like to be able to spread papers out and compare things side by side. Plus, in my experience, phone batteries always die at the worst possible moment." The first property was located in a neighborhood called Riverside, a working-class area that had seen better days but showed signs of gradual improvement. New streetlights had been installed recently, and several houses on the block displayed fresh paint and well-maintained yards. "What do you see when you look at this neighborhood?" asked as they drove down the main street. "Potential. It's not gentrified yet, so property values are still reasonable. But there's investment happening, new businesses, infrastructure improvements. Give it 5 years, and these houses will be worth significantly more than they are today." They pulled up to the first house, a small ranch-style home with vinyl siding and a chain-link fence. The listing agent, an energetic woman named Carol, met them at the front door. "This one's been on the market for 73 days, Carol explained as she unlocked the door. "The owners inherited it from a relative and just want to sell quickly." The interior was exactly what had predicted. Worn carpet throughout, an outdated kitchen with appliances from the 1990s, and bathrooms that needed cosmetic updates. But the bones of the house were solid, no water damage, good electrical system, and a newer roof. "What are you thinking for rent on a place like this after renovations?" asked as they examined the kitchen. "Based on comparable properties in the area, probably $800 to $900 a month. Maybe more if we do the kitchen renovation right." Pulled out a small notebook and began calculating. Purchase price of $75,000, renovation costs of perhaps $15,000, total investment of $90,000. If they could rent it for $850 a month, That would generate just over $10,000 in annual rental income before expenses. The numbers work, he said quietly. Carol overheard him. Are you folks investors? We're considering it, replied diplomatically. What can you tell us about the neighborhood's trajectory? Honestly, 3 years ago I wouldn't have recommended buying here. But the city's invested in new parks, the school district has improved their ratings, and we're seeing young families start to move in. Properties that sat on the market for months are now selling within weeks. The second property was in a better neighborhood called, where tree-lined streets and well-maintained homes created an atmosphere of quiet stability. The house itself was smaller, but in much better condition. This one feels different, observed as they walked through the living room. It's move-in ready, agreed, which means less renovation cost but also less potential to add value through improvements. The listing agent for this property, an older man named Frank, had a different perspective. This neighborhood's been stable for 20 years. Property values appreciate slowly but consistently. You're not going to get rich quick here, but you're not going to lose money either. Appreciated the honesty, but he could sense slight disappointment. This wasn't the kind of opportunity that excited her. It was safe, predictable, and conservative. The third property was the duplex, located in a transitional neighborhood called. One unit was currently occupied by a tenant who had lived there for 2 years, while the other unit had been vacant for 6 months. The current tenant pays $600 a month, explained the listing agent, a young woman named Sarah. The lease runs through the end of the year, and she's indicated she'd like to renew. The vacant unit needs some work, but once it's ready, comparable properties rent for $750 to $800. Spent considerable time examining the duplex, checking the condition of appliances in both units, testing faucets, and studying the electrical panels. Watched her work, impressed by her thoroughness. The occupied unit is in good shape, she reported. The tenant has obviously taken care of the place. The vacant unit needs new flooring, paint, and some kitchen updates, but nothing major. What's your assessment of the neighborhood? Mixed, but trending upward. You've got some houses that are well-maintained and others that need attention. But I see young professionals starting to buy here, probably because it's affordable and only 10 minutes from downtown. They walked around the exterior of the building, noting that the roof appeared solid and the foundation showed no obvious problems. The yard was small but functional, with parking spaces for each unit. What's your gut telling you? Asked as they stood on the front porch. This is the one. Higher initial investment but better long-term potential. With 2 units, we diversify our risk. If one tenant moves out, we still have income from the other. And this neighborhood feels like it's right at the tipping point. Back in the car, they spread out the listing information and began comparing the 3 properties systematically. Had prepared detailed analysis sheets that included purchase price, estimated renovation costs, potential rental income, and projected return on investment for each property. You've been busy, observed, studying her calculations. I stayed up until midnight working on these. If we're going to do this, I want to make sure we make the right choice. Reviewed her numbers, checking her assumptions against his own research. Her estimates were conservative but realistic, factoring in vacancy rates, maintenance costs, and property management expenses that many novice investors overlooked. Your analysis is more thorough than reports I get from analysts with graduate degrees, he said. Different perspective, maybe. They're looking at spreadsheets. I'm thinking about real tenants with real lives who need real places to live. They decided to revisit the duplex, this time paying closer attention to details they might have missed during the initial. Brought out a measuring tape and notebook, documenting the size of each room and estimating material costs for the necessary renovations. The vacant unit needs about $8,000 in improvements, she concluded after an hour of detailed examination. New laminate flooring throughout, paint for all rooms, updated light fixtures, and some kitchen appliances. I can handle most of the work myself, which will save significantly on labor costs. You can do flooring installation. I helped my dad remodel our house when I was in high school. Plus, there are plenty of online tutorials for anything I haven't done before. Found himself continually surprised by his practical skills and confidence. In his business world, people specialized narrowly and hired experts for everything outside their immediate expertise. but approached problems with a willingness to learn and adapt that reminded him of his own early days as an entrepreneur. What about the purchase price? The listing is $110,000. I think we can get it for $95,000. It's been on the market for 3 months, which suggests the sellers are motivated. Plus, having a vacant unit for 6 months probably has them worried about ongoing carrying costs. How do you want to structure the offer? $92,000, with a request for the sellers to cover closing costs. That brings our total investment to approximately $100,000 after renovations. Nodded approvingly, and your projected return. Conservative estimate, $1,300 per month in rental income once both units are occupied. That's $15,600 annually, or about 15% return on our investment. More if property values appreciate, as I expect they will. They drove to a nearby coffee shop to discuss the decision more thoroughly. Ordered sandwiches while continued reviewing her calculations, double-checking numbers and considering variables they might have overlooked. You know, said as they sat down with their food, most real estate investment firms would charge significant fees for this level of analysis. Most real estate investment firms aren't spending their own money. Good point, so are we ready to make an offer? I have one more question for you. What happens if I'm wrong? What if the neighborhood doesn't improve as I expect, or we have trouble finding good tenants, or renovation costs run higher than estimated? Appreciated the question. It showed she understood that real estate investment involved genuine risk, not just potential reward. Worst-case scenario, we hold the property longer than planned and sell it for less than we hoped. I can afford to lose the investment. Can you afford to have the partnership not work out as expected? Financially, yes. But professionally, this is my chance to prove I can do more than wait tables. If this fails, it might be a long time before I get another opportunity like this. Then we better make sure it succeeds. Smiled for the first time that day and realized the weight of responsibility she'd been carrying. This wasn't just a business venture for her. It was validation of everything she'd been working toward. Okay, she said, let's make an offer on the duplex. They spent the next hour drafting the purchase agreement, with negotiating directly with the listing agent while provided guidance on legal and financial details. Her approach was professional but personable, explaining their renovation plans and timeline in a way that reassured the sellers they were dealing with serious buyers. By late afternoon, they had an accepted offer at $93,000, with closing scheduled for the following month. As they shook hands in the real estate office, felt a satisfaction he hadn't experienced in years. They had found a genuine opportunity, analyzed it thoroughly, and negotiated a fair deal that benefited everyone involved. So what happens next? Asked as they walked to their cars. Now we start planning the renovation. Do you want to handle the contractor research, or should we divide that responsibility? I'll research contractors for the flooring and any electrical work we need, but I want to do the painting and smaller repairs myself. It'll save money and give me more control over the quality. Sounds like a plan. When do you want to meet again? How about Tuesday evening? I can have contractor estimates by then, and we can finalize our renovation budget. Driving home, found himself thinking about the day's events. He'd participated in hundreds of business deals over the years, many involving vastly more money than today's property purchase. But none had felt as meaningful as this partnership with. She had approached every aspect of the process with a combination of careful analysis and genuine enthusiasm that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with business in the first place. More importantly, she had challenged him to think about investment as something more than profit maximization, as a way to create value for communities and provide quality housing for families. His phone rang as he pulled into his driveway. His assistant calling about Monday's schedule. 3 board meetings, 2 conference calls, and a dinner with potential investors. The usual routine of managing wealth rather than creating it. But this time, found himself looking forward to Monday. Because now he had 3 weeks after closing on the duplex, stood in the vacant unit watching install the last section of laminate flooring. She had spent every evening and weekend working on the renovation, transforming what had been a dated apartment into something that could easily appear in a home improvement magazine. "Hand me that transition strip," she said without looking up. her focus entirely on ensuring the final piece fit perfectly against the doorway threshold. Had offered to hire professional contractors for the entire renovation, but had insisted on doing most of the work herself. "I need to understand every aspect of this process," she'd explained. "If I'm going to build a real estate business, I have to know what things actually cost and how long they really take." She had been methodical in her approach, starting with the kitchen where she'd replaced outdated appliances with efficient, modern alternatives. The transformation had been remarkable. What had been a cramped, uninviting space was now bright and functional. She'd chosen neutral colors and durable materials that would appeal to a wide range of tenants while minimizing future maintenance costs. "There," said, standing up and brushing dust from her jeans. "What do you think?" Looked around the apartment, amazed by the transformation. "It looks like a completely different place. You've added at least 15,000 in value with about 6,000 in materials." 6,200, actually. I kept detailed records of every expense." She handed him a notebook that contained receipts, time logs, and before and after photos of every room. Over the past 3 weeks, had visited the property almost daily, partly to check on progress, but mostly because he found the renovation process fascinating. He hadn't worked with his hands in years, but had put him to tasks, painting walls, installing cabinet hardware, cleaning up debris. The physical work had been unexpectedly satisfying. "When do you think we'll be ready to show it to prospective tenants?" he asked. "I want to give the paint another day to cure completely, then we can start scheduling viewings. I've already posted the listing online and received several inquiries." Pulled out his phone to check their advertising. The listing photos that had taken showcased the apartment beautifully, emphasizing the natural light and modern updates while being honest about the space's limitations. "What kind of responses have you gotten?" "Mostly young professionals and graduate students, people who want something nice but affordable. I've screened the initial inquiries based on income requirements and references." "How many applications?" 12 serious inquiries so far, with 6 people wanting to schedule viewings for this weekend. Was impressed by the response. "What's our asking price again?" $800 a month, which is competitive for the neighborhood but reflects the quality of the renovation. I'd rather have a good tenant at $800 than problematic tenants at $850. This philosophy had emerged during their partnership, consistently prioritized long-term stability over short-term profit maximization. It was an approach that found both refreshing and financially sound. The occupied unit's tenant, Mrs., had renewed her lease for another year at $650 per month, which felt was fair given the woman's excellent rental history, and the fact that she maintained the property better than many owners cared for their own homes. "Have you calculated our projected returns based on the actual renovation costs?" asked. Opened her notebook to a page covered with neat calculations. Total investment including purchase price, closing costs, and renovations, $99,200. Monthly rental income, $1,450. Annual rental income before expenses, $17,400. That's about 17.5% return on investment. 18.2% actually. But that doesn't account for property taxes, insurance, maintenance reserves, or vacancy factors. Appreciated her conservative approach to financial projections. Most real estate investors he knew focused on gross returns and overlooked the impact of operating expenses on actual profitability. "What's your realistic estimate after expenses?" "Conservatively, about 12% annual return. But that assumes we have some vacancy and maintenance issues. If we find good long-term tenants and stay on top of preventive maintenance, it could be closer to 15%. Either way, it's significantly better than most traditional investments. And we maintain ownership of an appreciating asset. If property values in this neighborhood increase as I expect, we could see substantial appreciation over the next 5 to 10 years. Had been thinking about this aspect of their investment. Real estate offered both cash flow and appreciation potential, but it also provided something his stock portfolio couldn't: tangible value that wasn't subject to market volatility. "Speaking of long-term strategy, have you thought about our next property?" His face lit up with excitement. "Actually, I've identified 3 possibilities. Want to see them?" She led him to a card table she'd set up in the corner of the apartment, where she'd organized information about potential future investments. Her research had become increasingly sophisticated, incorporating demographic trends, local economic indicators, and municipal development plans. This first one is a single-family house about 2 miles from here. It's been vacant for 8 months, which usually means either the price is too high or there are significant problems. What's your assessment? Probably a combination of both. The listing price is reasonable for the neighborhood, but the property needs substantial work. New roof, updated electrical, complete kitchen renovation. Studied the listing photos. That sounds expensive. It would be. But if we can negotiate the purchase price down significantly, the total investment could be reasonable for the potential return. What's your target purchase price? Listed at 120, but I think we could get it for 90 or 95 if we present a strong cash offer with quick closing. The second property was a small apartment building with 4 units, currently owned by an elderly man who wanted to retire from property management. 3 of the 4 units were occupied with long-term tenants, and the rental income would cover the mortgage payments even with one vacancy. This is a much larger investment, observed, reviewing the numbers. $275,000, but the cash flow would be substantial. 4 units at an average of $650 per month would generate $31,000 annually. What's the condition of the building? Good bones, but it needs updating. New windows, HVAC improvements, some unit renovations as tenants turn over. But the current owner has maintained it well, so we wouldn't be dealing with major structural issues. The third property was the most intriguing, a foreclosed commercial building that could potentially be converted to residential lofts. Had researched zoning requirements and discovered that residential conversion was permitted with proper city approvals. This is much more ambitious than our previous investments, noted. It's also much more potentially profitable. The building is structurally sound but needs complete interior renovation. If we could create 6 to 8 residential units, the rental income could be substantial. What about the complexity of commercial to residential conversion? That's the challenge. It would require architectural plans, city permits, probably 6 months of construction, much more complicated than what we're doing now. Found himself intrigued by all 3 possibilities, each representing a different level of risk and potential reward. Which one interests you most? Honestly, the apartment building. It's large enough to provide substantial cash flow but manageable enough that we could handle the day-to-day operations ourselves. Plus, with multiple units, we're not dependent on any single tenant for our returns. What would we need for a down payment? Typically 25% for an investment property this size, so around $70,000. Did some quick calculations. Their current duplex investment had cost just under $100,000 total, and it was performing well. If they reinvested their returns from the duplex along with additional capital, they could reasonably handle the apartment building purchase. Would you be interested in touring the apartment building this week? I already scheduled a viewing for Wednesday evening. I wanted to see if you'd be available to join me. Smiled, proactive approach continued to impress him. She didn't wait for permission or guidance. She identified opportunities and took action. I'll clear my schedule. What time? 6:30. The current owner wants to meet potential buyers personally, which suggests he cares about who takes over the property. That could work in our favor. If he sees that we plan to maintain and improve the building rather than just extract maximum profit, he might be more flexible on terms. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the apartment door. A young woman in professional attire stood outside, checking the address against information on her phone. "Are you here about the rental?" asked. "Yes, I'm Sarah. We spoke on the phone yesterday about scheduling a viewing." "Perfect timing. We just finished the final renovations." Stepped back while showed Sarah through the apartment, noting how professionally she handled the process. She highlighted the apartment's features without overselling, answered questions honestly, and explained lease terms clearly. "The location is perfect for my commute," Sarah said after completing the tour. "And the renovation quality is much better than other places I've seen in this price range. We focused on durability and functionality," explained. "Everything is brand new, so you shouldn't have any maintenance issues." "What's the application process?" handed her a prepared packet. Application form, income verification, references from previous landlords if applicable. We typically respond within 24 hours. After Sarah left, found himself reflecting on the interaction. You handled that very professionally. Customer service skills translate well to property management. Both involve understanding what people need and helping them find solutions. Most landlords I know treat tenants as necessary annoyances rather than customers. That's probably why they have high turnover rates and maintenance problems. If you treat tenants well, they take care of your property and stay longer. Basic business logic. Realized that's approach to property management reflected the same philosophy that had made her an effective waitress. Focus on providing value to customers, build relationships based on mutual respect, and success would follow naturally. Have you thought about what you want to do when this partnership reaches the buyout point? Every day, once I own this property outright, I'll use it as collateral for the next investment. Build a portfolio slowly and systematically. What's your long-term goal? Financial independence. I want to reach a point where rental income covers my living expenses, so I can choose work based on what interests me rather than what pays the bills. How many properties would that require? Depends on the cash flow from each property, but probably 10 to 15 units generating positive cash flow. Maybe 5 to 7 years if I reinvest returns and add savings from my regular job. Found her timeline realistic and her strategy sound. She had clearly thought through the mathematics of building wealth through real estate investment, understanding both the potential and the limitations. And after you achieve financial independence, then I can think about what I really want to do with my life. Maybe start a property management company to help other small investors. Maybe teach real estate investment classes at the community college. Maybe just travel and see parts of the world I've never had time to visit. Those are good goals. What about you? What do you want to do differently once you remember what business feels like again? It was a perceptive question, and found himself thinking carefully about the answer. Working with had reminded him why he'd originally been drawn to business. The satisfaction of creating something valuable, solving problems, building relationships with people who shared common goals. I want to find more investments like this one. Opportunities to create real value rather than just manipulate financial instruments. Work with entrepreneurs who have vision and practical skills rather than just financial analysts with theories. So you're thinking about changing your investment strategy. I'm thinking about expanding it. Keep the traditional investments for stability, but allocate more capital to direct partnerships with people like you. As they locked up the apartment and prepared to leave, realized their partnership had evolved far beyond his initial expectations. What had started as an exercise in nostalgia had become a genuine business relationship with someone whose judgment and work ethic he had come to trust completely. Wednesday's apartment building viewing would mark their next step toward building 6 months after their first meeting at Romano's restaurant. Stood on the front porch of their newly acquired 4-unit apartment building, watching direct a team of contractors installing new energy-efficient windows. Their partnership had grown beyond either of their initial expectations, encompassing 3 properties that generated steady rental income and had appreciated significantly in value. The apartment building purchase had been completed 2 months earlier, after extensive negotiations that showcased growing sophistication as a real estate investor. She had convinced the elderly seller to finance part of the purchase price himself, reducing their cash requirements while providing him with steady monthly income. It was the kind of creative deal structure that hadn't seen in years of traditional investment activities. The window installation should be finished by tomorrow afternoon, reported, joining him on the porch. Then we can start the interior unit renovations. Their strategy for the apartment building was methodical, upgrade building-wide systems first, then renovate individual units as they became vacant. 2 tenants had already renewed their leases at modest rent increases, appreciating the improvements being made to the property. The other 2 units would be renovated over the next 3 months as current leases expired. What's the projected timeline for full occupancy at market rates? Asked. 4 months, assuming no unexpected complications. Once all units are updated, we should be generating about $3,800 monthly rental income. That's higher than our original projections. The neighborhood has continued to improve faster than I expected. Comparable properties are now renting for more than I thought possible when we started. This had been a consistent pattern in their investments. Conservative estimates had proven consistently low as the neighborhoods they'd chosen appreciated more rapidly than anticipated. Her ability to identify areas on the verge of improvement had become their competitive advantage. Pulled out his tablet to review their portfolio performance. The original duplex was fully occupied with excellent tenants, generating monthly cash flow of $1,450. The second property, a renovated single-family house they'd purchased 3 months earlier, was rented to a young family at $900 per month. Combined with the apartment building's current partial income, their portfolio was generating over $4,000 monthly in rental income. Have you calculated our total return on investment across all properties? Handed him a detailed financial summary she'd prepared. Accounting for property appreciation, cash flow, and principal paydown on the mortgages, we're averaging about 22% annual returns. That's remarkable. It's been a good market for real estate, but I think our tenant selection and property maintenance strategies have contributed significantly to the performance. Had been amazed by his evolution as a property manager. She had developed systems for tenant screening, maintenance scheduling, and financial tracking that were more sophisticated than many professional property management companies. Her background in customer service had translated perfectly to landlord responsibilities. Speaking of performance, have you given more thought to the buyout structure we discussed? According to their original agreement, had the option to purchase share of their investments once they reached certain performance milestones. The numbers now supported her exercising that option, which would make her the majority owner of a substantial real estate portfolio. I've been running the calculations for weeks, she admitted. Based on current property values and our cash flow, I could buy out your shares in the duplex and single-family house within the next 6 months. What about the apartment building? That would take longer, probably 18 to 24 months. Unless property values continue appreciating at the current rate, in which case I could refinance and accelerate the timeline. Found himself facing mixed emotions about the prospect of buying out his shares. From a financial perspective, the returns had been excellent and the buyout terms were generous. But working with her had become the most satisfying part of his business activities, and he wasn't eager to end the partnership. Have you considered an alternative structure? He suggested. Instead of buying me out completely, what if we expand the partnership to include larger investments? What did you have in mind? I've been approached about several commercial development opportunities that would benefit from your analytical skills and practical experience. Projects that require more capital than you could handle independently, but where your expertise would be invaluable. His expression showed interest mixed with caution. What kind of commercial development? Mixed-use buildings that combine retail and residential space. Neighborhood developments that provide both housing and commercial services. Projects that create value for communities while generating strong returns for investors. That sounds much more complex than residential rental properties. It is, but the principles are similar. Identify undervalued opportunities. Improve properties systematically. Focus on long-term value creation rather than short-term profit maximization. They were interrupted by one of the contractors, who needed approval for window placement in the building's common areas. Watched her review the plans and discuss options with the contractor, nodding her confidence in technical discussions that would have intimidated many experienced investors. When she returned, was carrying a thick folder. Actually, I've been researching commercial opportunities myself. Want to see what I've found? The folder contained detailed analysis of 3 potential commercial investments: a small shopping center that needed repositioning, an obsolete office building suitable for mixed-use conversion, and a vacant lot zoned for multifamily development. Each project included financial projections, market analysis, and implementation timelines. This is incredibly thorough, said, reviewing her research. Where did you learn commercial real estate analysis? Same place I learned residential analysis. Online courses, books, and conversations with people who done it successfully. Plus, I've been taking additional classes at the community college. Additional classes. commercial real estate development, construction management, and small business finance. I realized that if I want to build something significant, I need to understand every aspect of the process. Was continually amazed by his dedication to self-improvement. While working full-time and managing their growing property portfolio, she had somehow found time to expand her education and research new opportunities. Which of these projects interests you most? The mixed-use development on the vacant lot. It would let us create something from scratch rather than fixing problems created by previous owners. What's the scope of the project? Ground floor retail space with residential units above. Target demographic would be young professionals who want to live within walking distance of restaurants and services. Investment required. Approximately $2 million for land acquisition, construction, and pre-leasing marketing. But the projected returns are substantial, both from rental income and property appreciation. Studied her financial projections, impressed by their sophistication and conservative assumptions. You factored in construction delays and cost overruns. Based on research into similar local projects, most commercial developments run over budget and behind schedule, so I've built cushion into both time and money estimates. What would you need from me to make this feasible? Partnership on a larger scale. I bring the analysis, project management, and operational expertise. You bring the capital and business connections. We split ownership and returns proportionally based on contribution. That's a significant step up from residential rental properties. I know, but I think we're ready for it. Our residential investments have given me confidence in my analytical abilities and your investment approach. This would be the logical next step. Found himself excited by the prospect. Commercial development would be more complex and potentially more rewarding than their current activities. It would also allow him to apply decades of business experience to a project that created tangible value for a community. Would you be willing to leave your job at Romano's to focus on this full-time? That's the plan. Once our current properties are stabilized and generating enough cash flow to cover my living expenses, I want to transition to real estate development as my primary career. What's your timeline for that transition? 6 to 8 months, assuming our current properties continue performing as projected. Their conversation was interrupted by his phone ringing. She answered it professionally, discussing lease terms with a prospective tenant for one of their properties. Listened to her negotiate skillfully, balancing their interests as landlords with the tenant's needs and budget constraints. New tenant for Unit 3 in the apartment building, she reported after ending the call. Graduate student who wants a 2-year lease. Excellent, that accelerates our timeline for full occupancy. It also means we'll have consistent income from all 4 units within the next month. Realized that their success had created an interesting problem. They were generating more cash flow than originally anticipated, which provided capital for larger investments, but also meant making decisions about growth versus consolidation. Have you thought about what you want our partnership to look like long-term? I want us to build something significant together, not just financial returns, but projects that make neighborhoods better places to live and work. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for David, a commercial real estate broker who specialized in development opportunities. How would you feel about touring some commercial properties next week? Are you serious? Completely serious. I think it's time we started thinking bigger. As they drove away from the apartment building that evening, reflected on how much had changed since that afternoon at Romano's restaurant. Had evolved from a waitress with business instincts into a sophisticated real estate investor with vision for large-scale development. Their partnership had produced financial returns that exceeded his expectations, but more importantly, it had reminded him why he'd fallen in love with business in the first place. Do you ever regret asking me for investment advice that day? Asked as they stopped at a traffic light. Never, best business decision I've made in years. Even though it's turned out much differently than you probably expected. Especially because it turned out differently than I expected. Realized that their partnership had taught him something valuable about success. That the most meaningful achievements came from building something together rather than accumulating wealth independently. Working with had shown him that business could be both profitable and personally fulfilling when it was based on mutual respect and shared vision. "So what happens next?" asked. "We keep building, one property at a time, one project at a time, until we've created something that makes a real difference." "I can live with that." As they pulled into the parking lot of Romano's restaurant, where would work her final shifts before transitioning to real estate development full-time, felt a sense of completion. Their journey together had come full circle, from a chance conversation about investment strategy to a partnership that was transforming both of their lives. 6 months earlier, Wellington had been a successful but unfulfilled businessman looking for something more meaningful than quarterly returns and board presentations. Today, he was part of a partnership that combined financial success with personal satisfaction, working with someone who had taught him that the best investment advice didn't always come from the most obvious sources, and who had started as a waitress with dreams of financial independence, was now a real estate entrepreneur with the knowledge, experience, and capital to build the kind of business she had always envisioned. Her investment advice had not only changed perspective on business, it had changed her life in ways neither of them could have imagined that afternoon when a millionaire asked a waitress for investment advice, and her answer had silenced everyone who thought they knew where value really came from substantial together. And for the first time in years, found himself truly excited about the future mething that his other investments couldn't provide. The excitement of building something from the ground up, one carefully chosen property at a time, with a partner who understood that the best business decisions were the ones that created value for everyone involved at a time, with a partner who knew the difference between getting rich and creating wealth as smart enough to recognize wisdom when he heard it. Regardless of where it came from, the evening couldn't come fast enough.